Yeah, I understand. I don't think so. I think that these reactions are instinctive. They're animalistic. They're not to do with the conscious mind and to do with higher thinking, right? That or higher sort of ways of perceiving the world or interacting with the world, that higher ways that are built upon philosophical self-searching and personal development, right? These most of the decisions we make are controlled directly from the psyche. The psyche is the basic animalistic program that's designed into every cell of our body, and it controls us to do everything we do. The woman we marry, or the man we marry, or the risks we take, or what we want in life, these things are actually all controlled from much deeper down than a conscious realm. And also, it all happens within, I don't know, something approximately 200 milliseconds. That's it, right? From the moment, when the trauma happens, bang, that's it. There's no, it's just an animal reaction. As Dr. Hammer says, it catches us on the wrong foot.
Episode 35, and we are back with a previous guest, Robert Jardine. He was on episode 5, so he was our first interview that I did as a podcast back last year, that basically turned this channel into a alternative health channel. So Robert is a German New Medicine practitioner, or GNM, and if you go back to episode 5, we go right into exactly what German New Medicine is, and he has a very, very good understanding of this, breaks it down very well. But in this episode today, we go a lot deeper actually into some insights that he's had over the last, I'd say about 6 months by the sounds of it. And for me, this is very powerful actually. And he was talking about things that I've not heard anyone else say before. I've looked into German New Medicine a lot, and I've followed a lot of different people over the last year or so, and his breakdown here and these insights that he's been having are very, very good. And it really does, I think, point the power back at you, and it's a understanding of essentially the outside world is a lot of noise, but ultimately this life really is a you versus you situation. And he ties it into the understanding of German New Medicine, which came from Dr. Hammer, and he breaks it down incredibly well. So a lot of value here. Please share if you think this will be helpful to anyone else. Like and subscribe if you can, and I really hope that you enjoy this episode.
Thank you for coming back. Great to have you again. We spoke recently, and you mentioned that you've been doing a lot of work, been working with different clients, and continuing your studies of German New Medicine. And you've had what you said is like a few breakthroughs. Maybe more information has kind of found you and given you a little bit more enlightenment around it. So I was really interested in one, and just sort of go through what this is, and just see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Jay. It's good to be here again. So I've got a few very interesting clients going at the moment, and it's funny how your mind works. It seems to sort of work unconsciously on, the mind does anyway, unconsciously on problems. You have a problem, and then, I don't know, it'll be bouncing around my brain for quite a while, and then maybe in a dream, or maybe I'll wake up, or I'll be just daydreaming, and an idea will come to me, and it'll be the answer to the question that I've been pondering over. So it's the way my brain works. It seems to sort of do all its computing without telling me it's doing it. In fact, quite often never tells me, but sometimes it tells me. Right. Yeah. So that's been good. I've recently been given. I To be honest, it's quite weird because I had some real quite vivid dreams, and I am a person that very seldom remembers my dreams. Um, I had a head injury some years ago, or quite a long time ago actually, in 1989, and I was unconscious for getting on 3 weeks after that. And since then, I never really remembered any dreams, or if I did, very, very, maybe one every 3 years or something. You know what I mean? Not often, right? But quite recently, I had some dreams, and they were really quite vivid, and I do remember them. And I was in like a hostel, and I was sitting having cups of coffee and chatting and looking at drawings with Dr. Hammer, right?
Hmm.
And we were discussing like his research, and so isn't that strange that I remember those couple of dreams. It happened a few nights, and I felt, wow, that's really quite unusual for me to actually to remember, and I was very blessed because I thought, wow, what a great guy to have a dream with, or to him in the dream, and to remember it. So I was really pleased about that. But he he left me with like a feeling of, it gave me answers to my eternal quest to heal the world and heal people, right? And to understand why we suffer what's commonly called disease, right? And I had this sort of feeling. He never actually told me in detail what this was. He just sort of gave me permission to know something more that was significant. So I felt really blessed about that. And soon after, some days after that, I, well, I just as a side issue, right? I had once read and was very interested in a Buddhist healing philosophy which talks about demons, and it's called Healing Your Demons. And you can look that up on the internet. And there's a few Buddhist. There's one lady, I forget her name, but she's obviously a high up Buddhist monk, and she was talking about healing your demons, and it's something that I cottoned on to quite a long time ago, and I'd done a lot of work on it, and I'd a kind of workshop, along with this sort of concept of healing our demons. But anyway, around so I'd had this dream with Dr. Hammer, two dreams. It was a couple of nights on the trot, and I had these dreams, really quite vivid. And then some days after that, this sort of came into my mind about the demons and this seemed to be. I had the sense of knowing that it was connected to what Dr. Hammer had. I connected with him, and he had sort of given me some kind of knowing that I couldn't consciously describe, but I just this sense of, oh right, yeah, that's how it works. But I didn't even know what it was he was talking about. I just had this feeling, oh, that's how it works. And then I had this I was thinking about feeding your demons, and then it sort of fell into place. And it was I think it's a valuable thing for anybody or everybody who is looking to heal themselves of any, right. We've talked before, Jay, about the biological conflicts and how the brain reacts. The psyche controls the brain, if you like. The psyche controls the biological processes in the brain, and we're all programmed with them, and the psyche latches onto something, and then it causes a symptom, right? And then like might cause cancer, or it might cause athlete's foot, right? Or anything in between there, right? Everything's included. And so the psyche so the psyche's like pre-programmed with these things that it latches onto life issues, right? If we suffer a shock, so that's all we've discussed that in the last show we did, right? But what occurred to me was two sides of the equation. Once the side that I've known, and if you go to the learninggnm.com website, you will see one side of the equation. You'll see that they'll tell you that the psyche is the, it controls the brain controls the body, and it acts in unison to life stresses, right? So it'll tell you, for example, that Crohn's disease is to do with an indigestible morsel. Okay, so and there will be some kind of anger involved with that, right? But I felt, well, I've worked with a lot of people that had Crohn's disease, and some of them have been completely successful and they're totally well, right? The healing is spectacular, and some other people not successful at all. So I wondered why that was. You're always thinking, well, what's the indigestible morsel conflict? But after these dreams, and then after this awareness came to me about the demons and such, right? It occurred to me that there's two conflicts happen when we start a so-called disease off. The one that's listed on the Learning GNM website is the biological reaction which the psyche makes, but it makes that reaction not directly to the shock or the life issue which has triggered it off, but it's made that reaction. See, the psyche wants to help us. It wants to help us all the time to stay alive and to feed and breed and to keep our whatever species we are. It wants to keep that species going as long as it can. That's what its purpose is, right? So in the moment that we suffer this trauma, which will be listed on the Learning GNM website, okay, as an indigestible morsel for Crohn's disease, for example, okay, in the moment we suffer that trauma, that we suffer a self-trauma. We suffer a feeling in some way that we are in some way to blame. Some element or some characteristic of us, right, is somehow involved in causing this trauma. And it's this personal conflict which the psyche tries to heal or uses to power its biological program. So, like, for example, the indigestible morsel, right, conflict which causes Crohn's disease. When you suffer a life trauma, so let's just say you've got Crohn's disease, right, and you want to get rid of that, and the medicine will never heal you of that, right, of knowing what that's about. So you go on your own. You say, I'm going to try and get myself well. So you go to the website, the Learning GNM website, you look for an indigestible morsel conflict. And you think, well, what the hell? Oh yes, well, I remember when it started, because that's the sort of process you got to do when you're trying to heal yourself. You've got to think, well, when did the symptom start? And then you've got to look at that symptom and say, so is that symptom healing, or is it a conflict active symptom? Because every biological process has got two halves, okay? And your glandular breast cancer grows in the conflict active part, whereas your intraductal breast cancer grows in the healing part, right? So you have to know which so-called disease you have to know, okay, which part of the process you're dealing with. In an effort, right, so that it's so easy to me to see this, but to get it out in words is sometimes a little difficult, right? But we have a symptom developing, you need to know if that symptom is a healing symptom or a conflict active symptom. Now, if it's a healing symptom, you then got to figure out, okay, what issue is it healing and when did that issue start? And that takes you back to where it was conflict active. So where the original trauma happened, right? So let's say the trauma is, you find the trauma, the girl, let's say it's a girl, she's got Crohn's disease, and it started in 2016 in February. And then that tells you, okay, so then you're looking for what resolved in your life at that time. What resolved just before this condition kicked in? Oh, well, you find it was something to do with a person, a boyfriend. So then you go back to, okay, so where did the issue that resolved with that boyfriend, where did it start? Oh, right, it started at such and such a party, for example, where I found him getting intimate with somebody else, right? So then you have the start of the conflict, right? But in that conflict, there has to be an element of self-blame in some way. And it's this element of self-blame that the psyche latches onto, says, right, this is how I can improve you to overcome this issue. So the anger is itself. It's how, in what way can am I responsible for this trauma that started my body to create inflammation, or to create a process which causes inflammation in my stomach and causes Crohn's disease? There has like an element where we blame ourselves, or another way to look at it is the psyche looks at what we've done and tries to find a way in which it can help us, and it finds that way by finding the way in which we in some way are responsible for the causation of that trauma. And this is where your healing lies. It's a self-healing. It's a healing in how you got to heal your relationship with the part of you that you feel is responsible for causing that trauma.
That's
right?
Interesting.
Yeah,
most people, I would imagine, they don't look at things to that depth. They're all, I guess, blaming everyone else, blaming everything else. They're not really looking at within to kind of heal
completely. Yeah, I mean, let's say she like, you'd think, well, she's blaming him for getting intimate with somebody else. Anger, right? But you will not find resolution in that. You see, that you can go back, you can do all the therapy you like, and you can find, oh yeah, it was at that party and this has happened, blah blah blah, right? But still, the Crohn's disease continues, because as Dr. Hammer says, you've got to find the emotional thread right back into the causative issue, the cause of it, right? And what came to me through these dreams I had, and the me sort of realizing, oh my Lord, I lost my head here, but like the demons and such, healing the demons, and it all sort of fell together in that the realization came through that you're looking for the part of you which is to blame for the trauma which caused the whole show to start, the whole program to start, and irrespective of what program it is. And within there lies a healing where you have to make with yourself. It's a healing with yourself, even though from the outside it all looks like, oh, it was the boyfriend, being unfaithful and doing this, right? But it's like, well, in some way, I'm not good enough for that boyfriend to stay with me. He's off with her. You with me?
Yeah. So on this, I hope I don't sort of sidetrack us here. So would you think would you say it's fair to say somebody that's done a lot of work on themselves, maybe their inner child work, and really kind of got to know that part of themselves, do you think that they would get less aggressive symptoms in this situation? Or is that a way to maybe not avoid illness, because we're all going to be struck by some illness at some point, but would you say that maybe the person that's done the less work on themselves could be the person that has the bigger reaction? Am I asking that right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. I don't think so. I think that these reactions are instinctive. They're animalistic. They're not to do with the conscious mind and to do with higher thinking, right? Or higher sort of ways of perceiving the world or interacting with the world, that higher ways that are built upon philosophical self-searching and personal development, right? These most of the decisions we make are controlled directly from the psyche. The psyche is the basic animalistic program that's designed into every cell of our body, and it controls us to do everything we do. The woman we marry, or the man we marry, or the risks we take, or what we want in life, these things are actually all controlled from much deeper down than a conscious realm. And also, it all happens within, I don't know, something approximately 200 milliseconds. That's it, right? From the moment, when the trauma happens, bang, that's it. There's no, it's just an animal reaction. As Dr. Hammer says, it catches us on the wrong foot. Our conscious mind is out to lunch, right? It's a biological reaction to a traumatic event, which is personally significant, and it sets the psyche off on a predetermined program. And after that moment, it's all just pre-written. The part of the brain is predetermined, the symptoms are predetermined, and when that conflict is resolved, the healing symptoms are predetermined. It's all worked out. It's predictable, 100% predictable. But that still leaves us with, yeah, but how do I heal this? Yeah, okay, if I've got Crohn's disease, or it's an indigestible morsel conflict. Oh, well, what was that? Well, my boyfriend, I caught him, getting intimate with somebody else. Oh, and I was really angry. Yeah, I was really angry. But that doesn't heal it. That won't heal it. It's that next, it's that one step further is, okay, so in what way, what should you have done or what should you have not done? Or what about you should be different that has caused the boyfriend to do that, right? And it's on that level. It's that extra step which is so important to suddenly trigger a healing, to basically resolve the conflict, right? Because the conflict is with yourself. Your psyche is basically saying, you're not good enough, so I'm going to change this part of your body to make you good enough so that you can solve this problem. That's what's going on with Crohn's disease. That's what's going on with your glandular breast cancer, right? And I tell you, another thing that really that must have set the foundations for me having these thoughts was, I started to read a book called The Germanic Heilkunde, and Dr. Hammer wrote this book. And in pages, he said that he developed testicular cancer. He talked at length about this, and he said he regretted painfully that he did not take his son out of this little hospital in Italy and take him to a big hospital. He blamed himself for not doing that, and that is the causation of his testicular cancer, because his body said, oh, well, I'll help you fix this. I'll give you another son, so I'll give you a bigger testicle. So he got testicular cancer. right? So because his son was dead, but with a bigger testicle, you can make more sperm, you can make more children. That's the biological, the function that went on. And so I thought, yeah, God, that is so important, because it's like the final to find. It's like the quest for the Holy Grail. Everyone's got their own Holy Grail, especially if they've got a disease they're trying to fix, and they've got to find this the starting point of it. And I think that's so critical. It's that element. Yes, you've got to find the trauma, but within that trauma, you have to find the part of the thing in yourself which you regret or resent, or wish was different, that caused that trauma. Am I speaking? Yeah. Are you making?
No, I'm with you.
Does that sound? Yeah.
It does. Yeah. I was going to ask. So putting this to the test, I guess you've had this realization. You're looking back. I'm imagining at all of your clients over the years. Is it clicking?
Absolutely, 100%, 100%.
And in terms of it clicking, then, so maybe the question I asked at the beginning was, if this happens and you've already done a lot of psychological work on yourself, and you're saying no, these conflicts normally come through things that are so shocking. There's no time for that. It's a biological response. It's mapped out. So if somebody has any sort of illness and we're looking at the GNM website and we're saying, right, this is because of this knowledge now that you have, can that help, not like nip it in the bud, but can it help speed up the process? Or can it really only be used by someone like you when they're already down the line and they're unable to heal? So
it can be used by everyone. I think it can be used. It's got many uses, and it's a healing is personal. As a therapist, I can help you heal you. I can't heal you, right? I can't give you a pill that's going to stop a biological process going on. If you've got eczema all over your body, or wherever, right? If you've got eczema, your body's creating that eczema because, and this is one of my strong belief now, because your body, or your psyche, your body's brain, is trying to help an issue that you have with yourself, which was created in the moment of that trauma. It started with a trauma, and in some way, your body tries to help you heal. Your psyche says, well, I'm going to try and help you heal here. So the way I try to do that is I look at you as if the psyche's looking at the person's response, and it picks the way in which the person failed and caused this trauma to happen. And it says, right, biologically, I'm going to fix your digestive system, or biologically, if it's eczema, I'm going to help you separate from that issue. So if you go to the Learning GNM website or any other GNM, right, you're going to say, oh, eczema separation conflict. But that in itself is not consistently going to get you to a resolution of the conflict. To get, I'm finding now, and it's I've had successes personally and with people, right, that it's that extra step. It's okay, so now we know the conflict, and if we're lucky enough to be able to remember or to find the trauma, and then we can just sit and we can be with that trauma until we latch into the part of it which was self-blame, and we release that self-blame out of it, because it may have happened sometime in the past, and we've done the personal development, or we've just evolved as people, and it's almost as if like this part of you with this self-blame, which is trapped in a moment of time, you can sort of help it release it. You can be your own therapist if you like. You can just say, well, it wasn't that bad in the grand scheme of things. But when I was 13 or when I was 16 and that was my boyfriend, well, to me then it was the end of the world. But now I'm 32 and I've still got Crohn's disease and I want rid of it. I realize, Jesus, it's not worth all that. It's not. Do you know what I mean? That moment of trauma, or that moment of self-blame, it's not worth all the suffering I've had. So there's like an interaction between the conscious mind, which has experienced all of the symptoms or the disease, and the moment that's trapped in that shock, and it kind of heals itself. Yeah, is that?
Yeah. One of the things, so a lot of these issues, so if we look at Crohn's, it doesn't just start. It slowly, and then it becomes a thing. Obviously, there's a starting point, but you might have it for a couple of months before you really notice something's going on, and then you start to build a bit of a pattern, and toilet breaks become more frequent, and then the pain, and then it materializes. What do you do in these situations? When you're trying to work with someone to go back, because it's not as clear as, oh, it started on this day and then 3 days before that happened, because it's a right rabbit hole, and now you're adding another layer to it, which I'm sure you can navigate someone with quite easily, because you're going to stay on track with, this is an internal situation. How do people even start with that? I guess this is where you come in, but for someone that's trying to learn this stuff on the fly, listening to this or listening to the last chat, I mean, but what would you say to that?
Well, where do you start? How do you help yourself through this? Well, you go to the website which I represent, which is learninggnm.com, but there are others. There's free-new-medicine.com as well, and there are others as well on Facebook and such. And you have to be knowledgeable. Do you know, there's something that this is another really a gem for people, right? Anybody that's on a quest to to heal people that they care about, okay? And there's two factors which I see in I would say everybody that I see, and I try to help with their health, right? There is the state of not knowing, and it always comes in as a pair of not having control. So you have not knowing and not having control, and the opposite of these two things is knowing and getting control. So most people, the way society's been set up, right, and the way that the disease industry is managing society, nobody knows. Everybody's deliberately kept in a state of confusion about their health, okay? Because Dr. Hammer's work has been scientifically published in 1981, I think he put his first thesis for it. So it's had a long time and nothing's happened. Obviously not, because it's been suppressed, right? But if people could move to a place of knowing, like as in if you have a condition like we talked about, Crohn's disease, right? So it's an indigestible, it's first and foremostly, it's my body creating this symptom for a biological reason, to help me because of an issue that started at a shock, issue, body helps, symptom.
So knowing that, ticking that off as your first stage puts you ahead of the game. You're on track now. Yeah,
you're on track. The next thing you do is you go to that website and you learn you read the 5 biological laws. And the first law is that there's always a trauma, right? The second law is every disease is part of a 2-phase process. So you need to know what's wrong with you. You say, right, is this disease a second phase symptom or a first phase symptom? If you've got glandular breast cancer, it's a first phase symptom. So you know that your body is in the first phase of this 2-phase system. So you're looking for you won't know exactly when the cancer started, because it might be some months before you feel the lump, okay? But you're as a therapist, I'm trying to help people find the start, the nest worry which started that breast cancer to start off, right? But if you've got Crohn's disease, the inflammation is actually a symptom of healing. So that symptom starts to appear, the the bowel movements, the rapid evacuation, the inflammation starts to appear when the biological process program starts to go into resolution temporarily. So it's a subtle thing, right? But it depends exactly on the condition we're working with. But it's like, if you know what's your eczema is a healing symptom, but so you're looking for what resolved just prior, the day prior or 2 days prior to that eczema starting, because that tells you the issue that had been running, right? So you're looking for what resolved prior to the onset of the symptom, whereas for something like an adenocarcinoma of some type, because they're all the same, you're looking for what trauma started it, not what resolved. Is the difference, right? So understand, you have to orientate yourself within that. So if you've got a problem and you're trying to get yourself out of this so-called health condition, then you need to know which symptom, if it is a symptom of healing or is it a symptom of conflict active. And then you're always looking to find the causative trauma that set it all off. And now that I've recently sort of come to be aware is that you're looking for the part of you that you feel responsible for that trauma. And there lies the healing, that relationship with that part of you. Because when that part of you gets allowed to be okay, allowed to have made that mistake and to move on and to release, then the whole thing starts to crumble and all the system just goes into healing, full on healing. Get your symptoms of healing then, but it'll just be the last time through. Somebody with Crohn's disease, they're constantly going into healing and then getting re-triggered back into conflict active, constantly, and the lining of the intestines gets thinner and thinner and more inflamed, and the symptoms get worse and worse. But that's because you're constantly reactivating the same thing. And it's the same with eczema and any chronic condition. It's the same thing. Multiple sclerosis, it's the same thing. Parkinson's, it's the same thing. All of these conditions are just reactivation of an unresolved issue. And at the core level, it's an issue you have with yourself.
Do you reckon that's why people that have like MS or Parkinson's or even colitis or IBS or whatever, they have like good or bad days? Sometimes it just knocks them for six out of nowhere, and then it's like they're kind of good again for a while, and then it gets worse. And do you think there's like something that's just on replay, and there's certain points of it that's like?
Well, it's your psyche that is driving it, and your psyche is constantly, until this issue with self is resolved, the psyche will 24/7 monitor your environment through all of your senses, right? Sound, smell, ear, taste, sight, all of them. And whatever senses
that are just constantly.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not sure. What are you saying? Sorry, could you say that again?
So there could be multiple triggers. So sometimes a smell would trigger, or a sound, or I interviewed a guy who does a lot with GNM as well. The Heal Your Gut guy, actually. He started with gut health and then he got into GNM, and now that's like predominantly what he focuses on. And he noticed that every time he goes in a supermarket, boom, it's just like a trigger. So there's like, it's almost like you're in fight or flight and your psyche's just on alert all the time. Bang, there it is. Right. Let's trigger it again. So it's just, you're saying it's this like a CD player, just repetitive, and it's.
Yeah. Well, when the psyche makes these memories, when the trauma happens, the psyche it remembers various aspects of the environment which it feels is significant, and it remembers those permanently, instantly and permanently, and subconsciously. Bang, it's recorded. And then from that time on, if you perceive subconsciously, you don't need to be conscious of it at all, right? If your senses perceive any of these, we call them tracks. So if you step on a track or perceive a track, it just hot wires you back to the original trauma and sets it off. Bang. And then when you step off that track, so like supermarkets, this guy, when he leaves the supermarket, he goes into healing, and within 5-10 minutes, he's needing the toilet, because that it takes for the process to run through. And that will continue until the day he dies, unless he can go back to what's called DHS in the Derek Hammer syndrome, which Dr. Hammer named after his son, because his son died and set all this in motion, this learning. So you have to go back to the DHS, and then you have to find the part of you which is to blame, the part of you which your psyche thought needed, it tried to help your failings in that moment. Right. Another example he gives in his book, right? He says he gives an example of a woman who's walking with a child, with a baby. She's just walking up the road with him. He's a toddler, right? And she meets a friend, and she's speaking to a friend, and the baby sees a friend across the road. So he just suddenly yanks his hand away from his mum, runs across the road to see his buddy. All of a sudden, the woman just becomes aware of a screeching of brakes, and thump, the child's been hit and is in intensive care now, right? So the woman develops glandular breast cancer in her non-dominant side. So if she's right-handed, it's in her left breast, and not in her right breast whatsoever. Her left breast grows a glandular tissue to feed the sickened child. But it's because the woman felt that she shouldn't have let the child go. You see, it's not necessarily, it's not the child being hit. Well, it is the child, but it's like, oh my God, the self-blame. Oh Christ, you know what I mean? Oh my God, what have I done? Oh my God, this hell. My kid's in intensive care now. You see? It's the self-blame that the psyche latches onto and then creates something to, I should have cared for that child more. In that instant, I should have cared. So the psyche says, well, if you want to care, it's about nourishing, feeding. So we'll give you more breast glandular tissue to make more nourishing milk to care for this child. And that's what it does.
Okay, so say this happens. You've got a client that's just had this exact example, right?
Yeah.
And I was going to say, I guess the bigger the problem, the easier it is to identify the trauma, right?
Correct.
So if you've got someone with Crohn's, it could be some low-level thing that they forgot about, and it's just there forever. And then, they go to therapy and they realize one day, and that's. But with this, it's quite a significant situation, right? Child hit by a car. You're not going to forget that in a hurry. You'll probably remember the date till the day you die, right? So let's say you've got someone who has this situation. You've now identified this. They're thinking, they're not going to think on the level that you're talking about now. You guide them into that. Then what? How do they iron this out? Do they need to speak it out loud? Do they need to go and do more therapy to understand, maybe to, kind of drill it in that it's not their fault? Okay. Do they need to, what do you recommend at that point?
Okay. Well, right. Firstly, it's illegal for me to say that I help people overcome cancer, right? Which I don't do. I help people overcome emotional issues or emotional moments. That's it. What the body does with that then is up to the body. It's not my doing, right? And I'm not saying for 1 minute I cure cancer, okay? I just help people, find resolution to stuff, okay? So that being said, the psyche, right, is pretty independent. You can't tell it what to do, and you can't make it go into resolution. There has to be certain things in place for it to go into resolution, right? Because it is hardwired into our reactive DNA, okay? And if the child recovers, that breast cancer, according to the research, right, and it's obviously correct because it just is, right, the breast cancer will go into resolution. Definitely, absolutely, definitely. If the child recovers, that breast cancer will go into resolution, and then the second phase of the two-phase process will start. and the biological system will kick in. And in the case of that type of breast cancer, there will be microbes, there will be fungi and tubercular bacteria will go in, will be released by the psyche into the tumor, and it will degrade the tumor and remove it from the body. That's what will happen, right? So that's likewise, if the child dies, or heaven forbid, that again will most likely, I'm pretty sure that will start a healing as well, because the child's died. The biological brain says, I can't feed that child anymore. Okay? So again, the same will happen. But if, okay, but if it, another sort of situation that can cause that is an argument. An argument within the nest can cause that type of cancer as well. Okay? In that scenario, okay, if the woman was to find the causative issue, and there will always be a lingering issue that was caused in the moment of that trauma. So if it's an argument, for example, well, it'll still be something that she's very annoyed about. As a therapist, you're then trying to get that person to change their perspective on the trauma. You know, because if you can somehow either change a perspective on an argument or an issue or a trauma or an event, that, if it's a genuine change in perspective, that can trigger the psyche to let go, right? It's sometimes with some conditions like this. I've treated somebody, one person that comes to mind now, had Crohn's for a long time, but when they realized that the trauma that started it is insignificant to them now, it just went instantly into healing.
So just even that awareness and acknowledgement of, do you know what, that wasn't even a thing, but without you having conscious awareness,
exactly,
the psyche hasn't been checked.
That's right. The psyche was just on repeat for 16 years or whatever it was, right? 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a boring replay.
Yeah, but when that young lady became to full realization, oh my God, that's what it was. Yes, that's it. Oh, and she had that feeling, the emotion just came flushing through her and out, and it came out in tears. That was it. Job done. She's better now.
Do you find these things often do come out in tears, like these?
Yes.
You know when you get it, like you'll know. Yes. You'll have this. Yeah. I actually had I've interviewed the guy Jonathan Butler. I did another RTT session recently, and we went back into parts of my childhood, right? And there was one bit in particular, and I don't really cry, not because like I try not to. I feel like the world's watching me, and I feel awkward before I feel sad, like. And I just allowed myself to go, and I felt healing on a level that it was just like 10 stone lighter. You know, I didn't necessarily have any kind of specific illness that I could pin it to at all. It was more just like a psychological letting go of a thing. Makes me think, could I have been a ticking time bomb in the GNM world because of all this built up trauma over the years? You know, could that be a thing that maybe my psyche's all alert and waiting for the next time to blame me on something? I don't know, but I felt that healing. So I'd imagine, but in this process, it's very powerful, and you're very aware. Right, that was it. This was big.
Yeah, you see, people. It touches something deeply emotional in people. When you get to that starting point, and you then connect to your own sort of self blame, the healing is with tears, and even issues that come out as anger, indigestible anger, for example. The anger is inherently powered by like it's almost a protection of self. There's a you've been hurt, so anger comes bursting forward, but you've got to go behind the anger to the part of you that was hurt. And it's touching that and connecting that to the loving part of yourself, taking it out of its little time capsule where it's constantly getting reactivated by tracks. Maybe even 10 years later, it's constantly getting re-stimulated and the symptoms are ruining your life, right? It's taking that little time capsule and opening it and allowing that wounded spirit, that's a good word, that wounded spirit to come out and be embraced and healed by the part of you that wants to heal you.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah.
Well,
I asked earlier about like if you're doing a lot of self-work, could this make you somewhat immune to these things? We spoke before about, because I'm quite into, like, I haven't let go of this yet. I've spoken to you, spoke to someone else that knows GNM. I've looked into it a lot, but I kind of hang on to this like toxicity in the environment. I eat well. I tried to eat well. I don't eat. Learning this hasn't made me savage. I'm not like, I don't care what I eat because I know, as long as I'm aware of, you know, the psychological aspect. So I'm still quite careful. And you were saying, I think if I remember, obviously the more toxic you are, maybe the bigger the reaction is because you're in a toxic environment. Would you say that could also be correct around the psyche? So let's say if you had some unimaginable trauma as a child, and now your ego is massively inflated, because the ego is essentially trying to protect you all the time. It's on red alert. Oh, that's danger. That reminds me of when we were 4. Right, I'm going to, you know, hit out essentially and try and protect you. So it's your body's, you know, you're psychologically protecting yourself. Do you feel that people that have more trauma could face bigger consequences in, you know, these, I guess, these biological conflicts? Or do you not think it has anything to do with that at all?
Sorry, I'm not. Do you mean because you were talking about food and such? So how do you mean?
So just like, so I mentioned food just as a subcategory, but say you've had a traumatic life.
Yeah.
Already you've got a lot of built up, as you said. It's like at your core, healing at the core, like beyond the, you know, the conscious mind and into the psyche at a deep level. So if you've had a lot of trauma as a child, or whatever, a lot of trauma, and you don't have any symptoms that are, you know, German medicine based, so you're just like almost like a ticking time bomb. You've had a load of trauma and you're just living out your life with this kind of heavy load inside, you know, from the past. Do you feel that these certain people that haven't healed their trauma are more prone to having worse symptoms if they go into conflict active phase? Does that make sense?
Well, are you asking if you heal a very long-standing trauma that may have happened in childhood? Is that what you're asking?
Right. I'm asking if you don't. So if you were like traumatized as a child and you got a load of trauma, a load of demons, essentially, is what we're talking about, right? So you got a load of demons, and then you have a situation which causes this biological conflict. So you got a lady. Let's go back to the example of the lady whose child got hit by a car, right? So she had a very traumatic childhood. So she's already got a heavy load on her, right? There's a lot of healing that needs to be done through her childhood experiences. This situation happens, child runs out, screeching car, gets hit by the car. I mean, if that happened to 10 women, would all 10 get breast cancer? Or could it be 2 and they're the ones that have the heavier load of trauma through a lifetime of trauma? Does that make sense? Because I'd imagine in that situation, not all 10 people are.
Well, I don't, you know, that's some question that. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit and say that our personalities, who you are, Jay, right, who I am, right, what we are, right, the way we interact with our pack, what we are within the environment that we live, okay, is determined by traumas which lodge in the brain and are permanently there. And our society, not our society, let me correct myself there. Our pack needs this programming as a unit. So a unit of, say, I think Hammer talks about 10. Roughly 1 in 10 men will be an alpha wolf, and 9 in 10 men will be second wolves. And the pack and the continuation of the species depends on that. That's programmed into us over all the millions of years of evolution that we've gone through. It's needed, and it's the same in every species. It's the same. Might not be 1 in 10. Depends if you're a herbivore or a carnivore, or if you're a reptile or whatever, right? Well, reptiles don't tend to go in packs, but a higher species, right? So that is programmed into us by the way we respond, usually in earlier life, and it sets our place within the pack. And these traumas very seldom resolve. Some of the traumas, if they resolve after the age of, say, 18, maybe 20 years old, the healing symptoms will be fatal. Right? It'd leave you dead. Right? Especially in nature, when you don't have, ambulances and oxygen and stuff like that, right? Okay, you're just in nature, right? It would leave you dead. So there are two things about these traumas. Firstly, they're not supposed to be resolved, because we're supposed to be a cohesive pack which functions as a pack with a dominant alpha wolf or alpha bitch and so many followers, right, to that. And secondly, they create our personality. They create core structures or core influences over our gender, our direction, gender direction or sexual direction, our whether we talk a lot, whether we're introvert, whether we're depressive, whether we're schizophrenic, whether you were athletic or whether we're plump, right? All of these things are not really to do with what we eat. It's to do with these conflicts that are creating units which exist within a pack, right? So you're talking about, the woman whose child yanked its hand away and got hit by a car, and would she have been reacted differently if she hadn't had these traumas? Well, possibly. I mean, that woman is the result of the childhood that has fashioned her into what she is, and we're all part of that, right? It's the way it is. And these long-standing traumas, according to Dr. Hammer, are very strongly tells us or told us that you don't mess with them. They're very, very serious. The consequences of you're perfect as you are, right? It's there's your friend just contacted me there, Josh. And he kind of warned against therapies that start to delve back into childhood stuff and resolving, having deep emotional resolutions about stuff that happened when you were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, right? Because you can you can end up with a coronary artery, a fatal heart attack from it, for example, right? Which it's not wanted, right? And so what am I saying to that? Yes, your early traumas do fashion what you are and how you interact with life, and therefore they do affect the adult woman whose child yanked itself free. It's conceivable that how that woman would respond to that trauma. And if 10 women had the same trauma, perhaps only 7 of them will react in that way. Somebody else might end up with rheumatoid arthritis, severe self-devaluation. God, I'm just rubbish. So then all of a sudden you have inflammation on all of your connective tissue all over your body. You with me?
Yeah.
Yes. So what Jay, speaking to me right now today, is the result of what nature, what your life experience created in you early on. And then we just get on with it, right? And we just live our lives and die as part of the pack. So it's everything's connected, and do you know what? There's no right and there's no wrong. There's just reasons why people are the way they are. I mean, obviously, recently, the way that society's been manipulated by the media and such, that people are sort of taking things to extremes with certain elements of our behavior. But that's just a time that we're going through as a society just now, right? Let's sort of not think about the stuff where you get loads of people being ridiculous, and because it's the thing to do, or they professionally gain from it, right? But just in the terms of honesty and who we are, right? It's all got a reason, and there's no wrong, and that it's all part of a bigger picture, and therefore it is needed, provided we as a society can accept ourselves for it. Do you know, we judge ourselves because of what we feel society expects of us, or what we have accepted from society, and then we create our own self-expectations. We're our own worst judges. I find that a lot working with even myself. Do you know what I mean? I'm no different than everyone. We're all on the same trip through life. And I think something that Dr. Hammer has given that is entirely precious is that we're all okay, and that nature is trying to help us all the time. And you can't heal nature. Because I mean, when I first learned this, I thought, oh, this is great. I can heal this in myself and that, and I can become this or that. And I very soon learned that some of these long-standing conflicts that fashion our character, they're almost impossible to heal, because if you do heal it, your body will not. It'll be so traumatic biologically to your body that it'll be the worst decision you ever did. It'd be a really bad mistake to do that. So, and whether or not, like your original question, which I'm still sort of trying to answer for you, the early conflicts, yes, they will determine how you respond to things, and being very mindful and all this sort of self-preparation in life, we might meditate, we might do this. It really won't. I don't think it's going to be a big player in stopping you having conflicts. It's not going to stop you get ill. It's not going to stop you getting the flu, because, well, it might have some influence on it. It's hard to say, but you still have the propensity within you to have that illness, whether it's the flu, right? Because you might have had a scare fright or a stink conflict. Because it's our biological brain which is driving our behavior, not our conscious mind.
And it has to be, as you said, something that's quite shocking. So you're not ever really going to be prepared for something. What about, okay, just adding another layer to it then, what about stress? So we all know that stress can be
Hmm.
bad. We could all
Yeah,
agree on
definitely
that.
is.
So if you're, again, going back to the toxic world, if you live in the world
Yeah,
where you believe, toxicity, so the more stressed you are, probably the more things are going to be toxic to you because your body's in fight or flight, blah, blah, blah. If you're, so if you had and again, we're talking about complete hypotheticals, something that caused a conflict and a reaction, if you were less stressed or more stressed, could that be a factor?
yes, yes,
Okay.
definitely. If you're getting stretched on too many fronts, okay, you're getting challenged on too many fronts, you become more like a hunt, like a rabbit caught in the headlights. You know, it's life is hunting you. You will be more vulnerable. Whereas if you're feeling affluent, you feel the, well, if anything did happen, I could easily get my way out of this, right? You know,
You're halfway there already, like,
yeah, that you will be less prone to having EHSs, these traumas which, you know, leave us in a compromised position, and it's instantaneous, or it catches us on the wrong foot, and we're just left speechless. You know, we're left in a flounder, right? Uh,
mm,
if we're feeling cushy in life and we've got resources behind us and people around us, that's less likely to happen. So yes, most definitely so. But how do you stop that, Jay? Do you know how do you get on top of life to that level?
I think, you know, looking into the GNM stuff, and I do take it, I take it pretty seriously. As you said, my friend's been in touch with you and somebody that I sent your way for this very reason.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have done that if I didn't believe in it. But I do think it's really important to manage stress, of course, which is incredibly hard, but equally to live a good life and to know what, you know, because toxins that are in your environment or in your body will break your body down at the same time. So you're kind of it's an uphill battle already. So then when you face something like this, I feel like it's just, double the blow. So I always kind of look at it as trying to just cover all bases really and understand that my body's trying to help at all times and and work with it. But I guess maybe what you're asking is the current state of the world. I mean, how is it? It's impossible not to be stressed. Whether you believe in what's
yeah,
happening from the agenda perspective, you've got
yeah,
people like me that are talking about, and I'll stress you out. I don't believe in the way things are going, and these people stress me out. So it's like constant turmoil at the moment.
yeah. Yes, so definitely so. Um, with I just want to touch back on, but you're talking about toxins and making you ill. Um, there's no illness. Dr. Hammer's last law, and it's a law, it's a biological fact, it's a truth that's true to the core, right? There is no illness. Everything's part of a biological attempt to help that individual, as an individual or as part of a pack, to to have a to continue to live successfully and to to be part of that pack successfully. So illnesses are a misnomer, right? But if we call them biological reactions to life stresses, well, pretty much all diseases have been described and explained by Dr. Hammer's findings, so that every disease, every so-called disease, right, is is mediated by the psyche as it responds to the life that it perceives,
Mm.
right? That's just the way it is. Um, it sounds a bit awful to say it, but it's only ignorance that can argue with that. Because when you actually see, when you actually get right into it, you suddenly realize, oh my Lord, right, this is obviously true. This is the truth here, right? So from this
Yeah.
truth, then I can start looking out from this truth. So a bad diet, that can be crucial to your recovery. Toxins can be
Um,
crucial to
le-
recovery, but they do not cause the illness. Is what I'm saying to you, right?
Yeah,
Or
just like
it's
less
not even an illness.
resources.
They do not cause the emotional conflict, and they do not cause the resolution of that conflict, which starts off the asthma, or starts off the Crohn's disease, or starts off the introductal breast cancer, right? For example, toxins have got nothing to do with it. But oh my lord, if your body is now going into healing, and it's going to go through a stormy waters to get you back on to normal again, right? And if you're loading yourself with rubbish food and toxins and drinking a bottle of whiskey every night, yes, that's going to be very that's going to be very significant in your recovery, right? So in that way, yeah, toxins, you don't want to be eating drinking too much chlorine in the water, or drinking too much strong alcohol, or eating rubbish food, or for example, if your dietary choices, let's say vegans, or they might not be eating loads of the protein that are needed for the body to remove the glandular breast cancer from itself. You with me? So in that way, these things like diet,
you're almost helping the body stores, and then you're supporting the body.
Yeah.
Because I'm very aware, even if I take the GNM side out of it, all you're doing with a good diet is supporting the body.
Yeah.
The food isn't necessarily doing much. It's what your body does with the food and how it utilizes the food.
Yeah.
So if that part of your, the psyche's turned off, that part, that healing part, or the part that, does the final healing, or if you don't have the right minerals, or you're too toxic for that final piece, then your body can only use what it has, right? So I guess that's the part of it. Yeah. Do you know, nearly everyone I've spoken to, whether they know about GNM or not, they focus more on certain other health aspects. Could be supplements, diet, whatever. We've all agreed mutually, every single time I've asked a question, that psychological aspects are, the number one. That's like the number one. People wouldn't look at it to the depth that you have if they don't understand GNM, of course. Because it's a whole body of study within itself. But they would know stress, trauma, these are the things. I interviewed a guy called Mark Linton, who he's becoming quite well known in the cancer industry, right? And he's essentially come up with a theory which a lot of people have been talking about for a long time, but he's kind of mapped it together scientifically, with it being like a pathological, fungus, essentially. And I thought it was quite interesting. About 30 minutes ago, you said, when the body goes into healing, what happens?
Yeah. Well, all adeno and adenoid adenomas, which incidentally are controlled from the brainstem and the cerebellum. So all of them, they use fungi or fungal bacteria in the form of tubercular bacteria. These are the sort of most basic types of bacteria that are the kind of like funguses. They're just the most basic, archaic bacteria that were prevalent at the time of our evolution, when our brain stems were just being developed by nature, by God, by nature, right? That's when, so that was used, that's programmed into it, that's programmed into the brainstem and the cerebellum. So when your acne, when your acne goes into healing, right, you get bacteria and fungi in there. They're supposed to be there. The body wants them there to do that work, right?
If you start going in there to kill them, are you causing issues there?
Your body will heal, but what's left once the brain has run the brain has gone through its two phases of the disease, the so-called disease. So it's acne now, right? So the first phase of the acne is cellular proliferation of the corium skin, which is the underskin. It's the deeper skin, right? Which is controlled from the cerebellum, which is the old reptilian brain, right, at the back of the head. So when you suffer, let's say you're a teenager and you look at yourself and you think, God, I'm ugly, or God, there's something not, I'm somehow distasteful, right? Self-attack, for example. Then the psyche will say, oh my Lord, I need to protect myself from that insult that I've created to myself, okay, right? I will create more corium skin adenoid tissue. I will make my corium skin thicker where I've attacked myself on my face, right? Because I think I'm pretty damn ugly, and she'll never love me, right? Because I'm only in second year at school, and life revolves around that, okay? So, right, so my body tries to protect itself from my own insults. So it grows extra cells on the corium skin. Now, when that conflict goes into resolution, right, the body wants rid of those adenoid cells. The only way it can do that, and bearing in mind these cells are below the epidermis, so they're trapped in the lower skin. So the fungi go in there, right? They start to get, digest the extra cells, causes pus. The pus bubbles into pimples, and then we end up with the pustular pimples, right? So then you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, oh my God, I look even worse. So you attack yourself again, right? And it kind of goes on. It goes on. But nevertheless, if you get some kind of treatment that kills all the activity of the fungi and the bacteria, I reckon you will get rid of the pimples, but you'll just be left with once the brain has finished its healing, because the brain's pre-programmed, it's ticking like a clock. So when the healing phase is finished, you'll just be left with all these lumps of extra tissue in your corium skin, which normally would have been removed as pus, but they'll just be left as like raised lumps on the skin, right? Because it'll be extra corium skin. So, you're stuck in do you try and kill them? Do you try and kill the bacteria and stop the pus, or do you let nature do its thing? I don't know the answer to that. That's a personal thing, but that's what's happening in your body. If you have knowing, then you can be in control of what you do. What you do will be of, well, let's put it this way: knowing and control. I said, right? If you know that you're attacking yourself is causing your acne, you can change your attitude about yourself, right? And then you know also what's going to happen, so you don't hate yourself for the pimples that come forward, and that way you can get out of acne.
Yeah. Do you think this explains to some degree the whole placebo thing?
How placebo?
I can explain why I'm asking that if you want me to.
Yeah, I'm not sure really. What do you mean?
So if we look at let's go to tooth decay, right?
Yeah.
This is probably a good example because I've reversed a few cavities and I've helped others do the same.
Nice one.
Not through the German new medicine factor. It's through destroying the bacteria, which in German new medicine is there to essentially help the tooth, I guess, to heal the tooth. So I'm going in there and killing it. But then what we're doing is we're eating the right foods and creating an alkaline environment, making sure the saliva is alkaline, blah, 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 which is then healing the tooth. But when you're talking there about acne, the reason that I ask that question is I wonder if, it's like a biting conflict, I think, that causes the cavity, right, initially. But if you're going through this process that I've mentioned and it works, I wonder if there's like an element of by being in that process, which is, I don't know, it wouldn't have done with the original conflict because you could reverse a cavity without being aware of that at all. But is it maybe the psychological aspect of, as I'm doing things to help my body to heal, which is then perpetuating healing? Like, how would that work in the GNM model? That's what I've kind of always struggled with.
Right. Well, the GNM for tooth cavities, right? You've got the enamel, and you've got the bone that's underneath the enamel. So your tooth basically got two. You got the pulpous middle bit with the nerve and stuff in it, but you've got like two layers of bone, right, which make a tooth. You got the enamel and then the bone that's under the enamel, right?
Yeah, dentin.
So so it's a bite conflict. The enamel is not being allowed to bite back, and the dentin is not being able to bite back. That's the difference between the two conflicts.
Yeah.
It's like being being inferior, or who's caused the issue is superior. So in a wolf pack, for example, like if a great big alpha wolf was challenging me, right, I'd just feel, oh my God, I can't cope. I can't bite back at this guy because I'm not physically, able to do that because he's, twice as heavy as me and twice as strong, right? Whereas the enamel is, I'm not allowed to bite back. I'm withholding myself from biting back. It's not that I can't bite back. It's I'm not allowing myself, or there's something that I'm stopping myself bite back. Right? So that's just a little point about tooth decay and the two levels of teeth, right? The two because the relays for the enamel and for the dentin are close to each other, but one is in the cortex, which is the very outermost layer of the brain, and one is in the medulla, very just proximal to the relay for the enamel. So you've got one relay for the enamel and one of a tooth, and one relay for the periodont of that tooth, right next to each other, but one is in the cortex and one is in the cerebral medulla, right?
Yeah.
Now that carie or ulceration of the tooth, right? Degradation of the tooth, I suppose is a better word of it, cannot be stopped by diet, right? Because the body's doing it. The body's actually doing it. It is especially the inner the periodont tissue, but diet can stop the activity. I assume that diet can stop the activity of the bacteria. You can manipulate your pH levels to suppress the activity of bacteria, right? Or organisms which will be involved with the cerebral medulla. The cortex, which is the enamel, I'm not sure what bacteria, if any, are involved with that, but the process is running in two phases. The active phase, you have cell loss of the enamel, and in the healing phase, you have cell reconstitution. So the cells are getting remade, right? Diet, I can't really reason how diet may stop the pain, like the toothache, but the body is intending to refill, provided there's resolution to that conflict. The body is intending to refill the carie, right? That's the purpose of it. It has a purpose to do that. The tissue gets eroded when the conflict is active for the enamel, and then rebuilds when the conflict is resolved. And at the end of it, it's as healed as it's going to be naturally. With the same in principle is happening to the periodont. The body's trying to make the tooth stronger to make you better able to bite back. Right? That's the biological purpose of it, which would have been just a ticket back in our evolution when this was, you know, programmed into our psyche. So diet, you know, you can alter how the psyche heals or runs its programs by restrictive diets, by getting rid, you know, making your pH super alkali, which is also has been sort of purported to stop cancers or heal cancers, but really it doesn't, according to the German New Medicine philosophy. And it just, tubercular bacteria, they need an acidic environment. They work best in an acidic environment. So that's why the psyche tries to get our pH into the acidic range so that it can heal itself naturally. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but you know, diet cannot put you into healing, but it can modify how the psyche manages the healing process.
Yeah, so maybe
but I want to add, Jay, I just want to add to that. If the conflict is not resolved, diet cannot heal that carie, according to GNM. Right, the tooth rot will continue. Right, the tooth, whether it's the enamel or otherwise, it will continue to get a bigger and bigger hole in it. Right, but normally we only realize we've got tooth problems when we go into healing, because that's when you get the pain. That's when the toothache kicks in the healing phase. And then, of course, if you then make your body super alkali, that could change the sensations and healing of the healing. Yeah? I'm sorry, okay. I don't know if that's contradicting you in some way, but that's to the best of my knowledge, that's my explanation of it.
It's something I'd have to go away and think about. I've been thinking about it for, you know, since our first conversation. But I guess what you're doing by the protocol, I guess, that I'm talking about, because a lot of it is like antibacterial, like fungal, you know, these things. So maybe what you're doing is you're creating an environment where the damage limitation is less during this process. Maybe that's a factor, because if your mouth remains acidic during this process that you're talking about, it can wreak havoc, right? So a cavity can go from nothing to bad relatively quickly within the space of a few, 6 months or something. But maybe by, like you said, alkalizing the mouth, getting the right, balance going on, maybe the damage done, because the process of, as you mentioned, during the cavity is a breaking down and a healing process. So if the environment isn't perfect because you've maybe hijacked it using chemistry, whatever, could the body's ability to break it down be less? I don't know. Is there less of a process there? Is it less of a perfect environment for that to happen? Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm not entirely clear on what we're saying here, but if I always go back to the simplest way of looking at things, and sort of then like go to the top of the mountain to look down, to just get the bigger picture, right? And everything the body does is to help us. Now, we are not so much different than lots of other animals, right? Lots of other animals have got teeth, right? And like cows eat grass, right, and wolves eat meat, and right, and that's, as human beings, I suppose we're sort of in the middle of that, right? We're supposed to eat meat and nuts, and some people say we're not supposed to eat meat. Some people say, but I mean, I personally think that, you know, the history of mankind shows us as being carnivores, right? And that's the food that we've evolved within. That's the food environment we've evolved within, right? And yes, you can, if you severely with knowledge, you can eat foods that change your pH. That's definite. That's a known. That's a given, right? And that will affect how the psyche works, right? The psyche is just a program. It's not particularly intelligent. It's just triggered on, boom. And then when it's resolved, it's triggered off, boom. And it just does its thing. It's pre-written. And it's pre-written with the assumptions made that we will be eating what we were eating when that program evolved into our brains. Right? Yeah. That's the assumptions made. Yes, if you do something radical with your diet and get your pH level up to something, you know, much higher than it would normally be, then, well, yeah, that's going to have some effect on it somehow, right? But nevertheless, okay, what's going on is a bite conflict. The erosion in the tooth, whether it's the enamel or the periodont, will continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's correct, until the self issue, because we started off with this, remember, until the self blame about the reason why I didn't fight back to the boss or something like that, right? Until that is resolved, and then the process tries to biologically repair itself. Right?
Yeah. I could.
Your diet, do you know, your diet possibly could help that. I'm not sure, right? That's my knowledge. And within my sort of framework of knowing, I can't really rationalize how diet can cure an active bite conflict. If there's an active bite conflict, I don't think that I can't rationalize how any diet change could repair it.
Yeah. Okay, I need to think about that. I'm one of those. I need to understand, you know, the nuts and bolts of things, and I can see this. There's something there for me. At the moment, this is where I'm at. I'm willing to go with the whole GNM thing, but when it comes to the teeth, that's the one thing that I'm like, I don't know, because I think with the teeth, and it goes back to that environmental factor. Disease, you know, you said there's no like real disease, it's the conflict, you know, we've been through all of this. But with, say, the teeth, it's almost like it could potentially be like a trauma in a way. So say if your mouth is acidic constantly because you're eating the wrong foods, essentially what you're talking about, you're meant to eat this way. And normally the people that do have great success with fixing their teeth, they start to eat more in line with nature. So there's definitely something there. So when this system was created, as you said, it was created during a very primitive time, and go back to our primitive past. We ate meat. We didn't have sprayed glyphosate vegetables and processed food and all of this stuff. So that's also adding to the environment. That's creating a negative environment.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't know. I need to process this, but I'm willing to go with it to a degree. But I'm one of those. I have to kind of see it to believe it. And this is why, looking at the Josh situation, which we won't go into on here, of course, that is fascinating me because something's happened there. I think something's happened from a positive, as we've said. So that, for me, I mean, Josh has been into GNM for a long time. He's now almost going through the ultimate test here. And I set up a WhatsApp group with him and two other of my mates. We're all similar, how we look at life, we research, we share things. And it's just very strange that this has happened to one of the people in this group that's so focused on health and lifestyle. And
Yeah.
it's almost like we all kind of need to see this. And it's almost like I don't know, it's really strange what's happening. So, yeah, I guess sort of there, leaving it there, I can see you proving this. I do, and I can see your conviction and your belief, and that gives me a lot of confidence. And the way you explain things is very, very good. You really, really got into this, and it's really thought out. And yeah, I just I hope you get more clients. I hope you get more popularity. I'd imagine that's growing anyway. And man, just you're doing some really good work, and I just hope it all works out for you in that sense, and you can just keep spreading the message.
Yeah, well, thank you, and you're helping me do that, and it's great, and it's great to be able to help people, because it's what it's what we all need. None of us are expert in everything, I need help with stuff too, right? And we all, it's good to get it, when you need it. Obviously, when our health starts getting affected, it's just what I'm into, right? It's just somehow life has put that into me, and it's given me this, taken me on a path which I've been lucky enough to have learned what I've learned. And I'm just eternally grateful to Dr. Hammer and what he has given to mankind, because as we sort of touched on, there's lots of things going on in life and society just now, which are troubling for those who know about it, right? And I must say that knowing GNM before all this started in 2020, it so prepared me to see through it instantly. I knew that it was not real. It's all manufactured. And from that early days, I have learned so much about things that are not connected to health whatsoever. But I would never have been allowed into the perspective that realized that what we're told is not really what's happening. It's when you get into that world of realizing this isn't true. Like that, I know that's not true. I know something very fundamental. What we're being told right now is not true, right? Which kicked off in 2020, right? And that then opened up the whole concept of maybe things are not true. So I'm eternally grateful to German New Medicine and Dr. Hammer's work for allowing me to go into this other reality, which is, I believe, is much more to the point of reality than the one that I was living in. So I'm so grateful to be able to help people with their health, and I'm so grateful for German New Medicine to allow me to suddenly realize that lots of other areas of my life are different than what I was led to believe prior to that too. So it's actually, I've got a double win really, because I'm able to help people get well or overcome their so-called diseases, and I'm also able to see life for what it is at present, and I feel like I'm on a journey in those other directions too now, to live, to adapt to the current situation, and it's just all good, today I wanted to share that thing we started off talking about, because it's not immediately apparent when you look at all the reference sites for German New Medicine, because lots of people go there and they still don't get well, and they still die of this or have to put never cure their Crohn's disease, for example. And I believe, I don't know, the dreams I had with Dr. Hammer, and then these realizations that came to me about healing the demons, and I realized that the actual demon that we need to heal is a demon about ourselves. Even though we can, in the moment of the trauma, we can objectively look at that and blame something else for it. It's it's not that. The psyche is looking within us, what let me down, that caused that trauma, and that's what it tries to modify. And if you can have that concept, it can help you maybe make that last step to getting the resolution you want. And if anybody can get that from watching this and listening to me drone on, well, good luck. Well done.
But the one of the things that, because I didn't know you were going to say any of that, right? You just told me you've had some insights, and I'm like, cool, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But
a light there.
I've had my own.
Yeah.
I've had my own insights over the last couple of years, which isn't related to this, but as soon as you were talking about it, like clicked in my head. Like life is simply you versus you anyway.
Yeah.
And if we, for any reason, and I believe we do, we create our realities through like almost like our deep subconscious expectations, right? So I believe that to some degree we are creating this thing that's playing out back to us through our subconscious mind. Like
I'm with you.
So if everything that if something happens to you, essentially it's kind of happening for you in a way. And if somebody's pissed you off, the reason that you're pissed off is because you're pissed off at yourself, and they're just a vehicle of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I got from what you were saying. And the reason that makes so much sense to me is because I kind of believe that's the fundamentals of reality. So why would it be any different when it comes to your body? Because your body is probably a projection of the psyche anyway. Maybe the psyche is just, at this level kind of creating it all. And also it's not such a stretch to believe that it's creating your symptoms. That's not a huge stretch when you look at it from that perspective, if that makes sense. So that really resonated with me. And I would imagine that this new insight and what you've seen and what you've learned over the years has made you more connected to yourself. And what I've just said, you're more in control of your life than you actually think. And that's almost a secret that they don't want you to know. They want you to give your power to this person, this propaganda, this virus, this whatever it is. It's always out there. It's always them. It's never me. It's never, what's going on in here.
Yeah, completely. And I'm a believer. As well, as much as probably the same as what you've said about yourself. I believe that, our thoughts and our emotions on a real-time basis are creating the lives that we're experiencing, and that anything that can shift your vibration up to a more empowering, love-centered, a love-centered vibration, right? That is not, it moves away from judgment and fear and all that, and goes into loving what you are, and loving the moment, and understanding. It's easy to hate things that you don't understand. But when you start to understand why somebody behaves like that, it's not so hard. It's not so easy to hate them. Then you can feel empathy for them. Do you know what I mean? And likewise with your body, if you've got some symptom that you might hate about yourself, or you might fear of catching, right? If you understand it as the loving intent, which is powering evolution and powering what we are. We're created from a loving intent of life. Life wants to exist. Life in all its forms wants to continue through time, right? It's like a journey that we're all part of, and we all have our time within it, and we make the next generation that comes after us. Do you know what I mean? We play our part in it, and so through Dr. Hammer's work, we can start to move into the A, understanding, and B, loving. We can love the part of us that needs it, even though it's causing the disease that we're You know, love is all. Do you know that's a really good saying,
Yeah.
and that's what at the most fundamental level, that brain relay has been triggered by a a self judgment that needs love to heal it. And when it gets that love, when it gets that release of love, right, then the body, the mechanisms which have been given to us through evolution and through the force of love, right, and life, those mechanisms come into play to biologically get us back on track so that we can live another day and perhaps learn from that experience.
Yeah. Love, and one that I've never really been good at until I'd say probably recently is gratitude.
Yeah.
That is very, very powerful. It's almost like the opposite of fear.
Yeah.
I think getting to that level of gratitude, love, yeah, you know, we've gone through, these things will still happen, or they can still happen. At least if you live in that frequency, you could probably get back on track quicker.
Yeah.
And you can look at your body as that. You know, everything that's happening to you or around you in your environment is all happening for you. It's all a test. It's all to, you know, I always say, like, every decent movie you've ever read, like watched, or every book you've ever read, it always started with a tragedy, and then they overcome and they grow. You know, even probably your story, if we've got into it, it was like probably something bad happened and then you learned and then it opened up new doors. So I think just living and knowing that and trusting that, I feel like that alone is it just puts you on that level, you know. So, oh man, great conversation. I'm really glad that I had you on again. Yeah, we'll share this, and hopefully it does make that difference.